Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to be doing my December bullet journal setup. So for this month's theme I was inspired by traditional Japanese cloud pattern. Right now I'm drawing lots of clouds going horizontally across the page. These clouds are wispy and curly. I started off by drawing a curly line, then extending it out to create a wavy tail. I overlapped some of the clouds and I added multiple lines in the tails to make it look more wispy. This was my first time drawing these clouds, so I had some trouble trying to make it look natural. I found that the best way to draw these is just to start with a curly bit and then go with the flow. Keeping a loose hand also helps because you can create more curves and waves. These are natural and organic shapes, so it's okay if it doesn't look perfect. I also kept some space in between each cloud to make it look more spacious and airy. Now I'm going to use a brush pen to write December in the middle. I decided to use a cursive font since it matches the light and airy theme of the clouds. Now I'm just touching up and straightening up the lines of the letters with my fineliner. To make the clouds look more put together, I'm using a blue marker to draw a frame around the edge. I'm making sure to leave gaps in the lines where the clouds overlap it. This makes it look like the clouds are poking out, which adds more interest. I'm going over the lines a second time to darken it. I'm using a light blue marker to draw mist patterns. These are super easy to draw. It's just 3 lines on top of each other, slightly offset. I drew these to fill in the space between the clouds. Now it's time to color in the clouds. For this color scheme, I'm only going to use blue. In fact, I only use 2 colors in this entire setup, so it's very minimal and monochromatic. I scribbled some blue on the plastic and I'm using a colorless blender to pick up the color and use it to color the clouds. This way it will create a gradient. The blue marker ink is most concentrated when it first touches the paper, then it gradually fades out as I continue coloring, creating a lighter color that fades away. I really like this effect because it adds more dimension and also makes it look more like a cloud. After coloring the clouds, I'm using a darker blue colored pencil to redraw the frame and make it darker. I'm using that same colored pencil to draw a drop shadow below December. Since I only had 2 shades of blue markers, I needed to use a colored pencil for a darker color. In the monochromatic color scheme, it's important to have a variety of values from dark to light, so that it would have some contrast and not look too boring. I'm also doing a tiny bit of shading on the clouds with the dark blue to make it have more depth. And that's the finished cover page. Moving on to the calendar page. First, I'm using a ruler and a black pen to draw 31 boxes for each day of December. I made a bar in between the rows of each week for the dates later on. I also made gaps in the lines where I'm going to draw the clouds overlapping. On the right side of the calendar, I made a notes box. I want the boxes to look very straight and sharp so it contrasts with the curvy and wispy clouds. I'm going to draw the boxes like this throughout my entire setup. The edge of the calendar has a border around the edge. I will color in the borders later. The notes section has a border around the edge and a bar for the title on top. Now I'm going to draw the cloud. As always, I'm starting by drawing a curly line, then extending it outwards. I try to make all the clouds fairly horizontal like the cover page, so that it will look cohesive and not going in all directions. I'm drawing some clouds overlapping the calendar and some behind the calendar. I also made them in various sizes. These clouds are super fun to draw because you can draw them in any shape or way that you want. You can make it more complex by adding curly parts, or wispy by adding lines connecting to the tail. I'm just making sure not to place the clouds too close together so that it looks spacious and airy. Now I'm writing the days of the weeks and dates from 1 to 31. At the top, I'm writing December 2020 in the same font as the cover page. Now I'm just going to draw the mist patterns. I placed them in spaces that looked a little empty. Now I'm coloring the clouds. This time I'm using a lighter blue. I'm just coloring on the edges of the clouds and leaving most of it blank. Also, blue is a very calming color, and this setup is giving me a very calm vibe. Going back with the colorless blender and adding some darker blue ink in the curly spots to make the clouds darker. I think this method of doing a light blue wash before you use a colorless blender is better than just using colorless blender by itself. This saves more time and the clouds also look more colored in. Now I'm using the dark blue color pencil to color in the borders of the calendar. This dark color will add contrast and make the calendar pop. I tried to color the bar so that the date can still be seen through. This is a dark color, so I want to make sure that it's still light enough for the dates to be visible. I did the same for the notes section. At the bottom, I'm writing a quote that says, "Take a breath and relax." Since this theme gives a very calming, light, and airy vibe, I think this quote is a good match. It kind of relates to the calmness of the clouds. To finish it off, I'm just erasing the pencil marks and the calendar is done. Moving on to the test tracker. This is a student spread where I write down all my upcoming tests, assignments, exams, and things like that so I know when to prepare for them. Right now I'm drawing a chart, leaving gaps between the lines for the clouds to overlap. If you're not a student, you could turn this into an expense tracker where you track the way you use your money, or an exercise tracker for all the exercises or activities you did. There are so many other things you could do with this chart, so adjust the titles and categories according to your own needs. At the bottom, I'm drawing some clouds overlapping the chart. I'm getting more comfortable with drawing the clouds now, so I made it more complex by adding some curves and curlies inside of the cloud. I'm also drawing some clouds above to make it look like the clouds are floating around the whole page. On the title bar, I'm writing the categories related to tests, but if you're doing another tracker, you can write different categories. For example, the date, minutes, and intensity of exercise if you're doing an exercise tracker. At the top, I'm writing the title with a brush pen. I'm just cleaning up the edges with a fine liner. Just like the calendar page, I'm coloring in a border with a dark blue color pencil. I also tried to make it light enough for the words on the title bar to show through, but I think it ended up blending in because it was too dark. I colored around all the edges and avoided the clouds. Now I'm using a light blue marker to color around the edges of the clouds. When coloring in the clouds, I don't color the whole cloud, I just place some color in the spots where there would be shadows. Before I finish coloring the clouds, I decided to use the blue marker to color in every other row. This will add a lot more color to the page and make it look less plain. And that's the finished tracker page. Right next to that is the brain dump. This page is for all my ideas, video plans, or anything I want, so it's going to be a mostly blank page for me to write in. This gave me the idea of making a cloud frame. I wanted to look like a bunch of clouds in the sky that parted in the middle to create a space. So I'm just drawing the clouds as usual, except I'm drawing them in different directions. In this whole setup, I've only been drawing clouds horizontally, but since this is framing the page, I wanted to go vertically as well to fill in the edges. Also, to prevent it from looking too crowded, I didn't fill up the entire border of the page with clouds. As you can see, there are some gaps in the clouds, which makes it look more natural and less crowded. Of course, I couldn't forget the mist patterns. I only drew a few because there wasn't much empty space I needed to fill in anyway. Now I'm coloring the clouds like usual. I only colored a light blue on the curved edges of the clouds. Now I'm going in with a dark blue on the curly parts. To finish it off, I'm using this light gray color pencil to add some shadows. And that's the finished brain dump page. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Next is the habit tracker. On this page, I'll track how often I do my habits and which one I need to improve on. I'm starting off by drawing 8 mini December calendars for each of my habits. Each day I'll fill in a box in the calendar if I did the habit that day. The placement of the calendars are a little bit different than usual. I alternated between 2 and 1 for each row. I decided to do this instead of just making a perfect row because it makes it look like the calendars are floating, which goes with the cloud theme. Another reason why I decided to place the calendars like this is because it gives me more room to draw the clouds around them. Next, I'm drawing the clouds. As you can see, one of the clouds was thicker, but after I drew that, I decided to switch to a thinner pen. These clouds are kind of random, and they go in any direction and just float around the page behind the mini calendars. So my mistake from drawing a thick cloud in the beginning actually made me want to go make the other clouds have more line variation in the thicknesses. So I'm outlining some of the clouds in certain parts to make some parts thicker than the others. I actually think this looks really good because it makes the clouds look more interesting with different thicknesses. It's good that I made that mistake in the beginning because it led me to create something that looks even better. Now I'm going to finish coloring the clouds with some blue markers. I wanted the mini calendars to pop out more, so I'm using a gray color pencil to create a drop shadow beneath each one. And that's the finished habit tracker. Moving on to the mood tracker. This page is kind of interesting because I'm combining a bar graph style mood tracker with a drawing of clouds. Right now I'm drawing clouds all over the page. This isn't going to be part of the actual tracker, it's just for decoration in the background. My goal is to make this look kind of like a sky with clouds all over it. I'll show you how this works at the end. I'm drawing wispy clouds going in all directions, flowing downwards. I kind of connected the clouds by making a long tail that touched the other cloud. I wanted this to look very flowy and airy, so I'm drawing some extra lines that follow the curves of the clouds. These thin extra lines will make it look more wispier. Okay, now I'm going to draw the bar graph. I'm starting by drawing a box. I left some clouds poking out of the boxes, as you can see on the right side. Now I'm drawing a border on the left and right side of the box. With a gray color pencil, I'm drawing lines for the bars on the graph that I will fill in each day to track my mood. I drew them on top of the clouds because I want it to seem like the clouds are part of the graph, not a separate piece on top of it. Although I won't be coloring on top of the clouds, so the gray lines will only be guidelines for coloring the sky part around the clouds. After that, I'm writing the days from 1 to 31 on the left side. At the top, I'm drawing the moods, from saddest to happiest. I'm writing the title with a brush pen and a fine liner in 2 different fonts. As I mentioned before, I'm not going to be coloring in the clouds as part of the mood tracker, but I still want it to have lines so that it looks like it belongs in the graph. That's why I'm erasing some of the colored pencils in the clouds to make it lighter. The colored pencil won't be fully erased, so it'll still be visible, but it's a lot lighter and less noticeable. Now I'll show you how to use this mood tracker. Each day I'll color the bar up to the mood that I'm feeling. The higher the bar is filled up, the better my moods. I didn't color in the clouds. This will be kind of like the sky behind the clouds. These are the 2 finished pages. Lastly, we have the weekly spread. This is a place for me to write my to-do list and tasks for the first week of December. I'm starting by drawing 7 boxes for each day of the week. These are floating boxes, and I chose this because it goes with the floating cloud theme. I drew the boxes in different heights to make it look even more like floating. This time I was lazy and decided to skip drawing the border with my fine liner and just decided to go straight ahead with my colored pencil. But I was even more lazy because I didn't want to sharpen my colored pencil. So the point was very blunt and I had to press hard. Actually, this blunt pencil gave very broad strokes, so it made it faster to color in the border, whereas the pointy tip would have taken longer due to the thin lines. So I guess being lazy has some benefits after all. I still recommend drawing the border with a fine liner and ruler first because it will make the lines straighter. At the top of each box, I drew a line separating the box for the heading where I'll write the days of the week. I darkened the blue borders and now I'm drawing a bunch of clouds all over the page. I went back to drawing horizontal clouds because I want it to be all in the same direction. Some clouds are overlapping and you can see that I previously left spaces in the boxes for the clouds to pass through. At the bottom, I drew a small box for my weekly task. Oh, and I almost forgot to draw the last box for Sunday. This one is horizontal, but all the clouds are overlapping it, so it still looks like a part of the spread. I'm writing in the days of the weeks and the dates on top. I'm using a white gel pen to cover up the mistake that I made in the dates. The weekly task box is where I'll write all the tasks that need to be completed throughout the week. Now it's time for the color. Of course, I'm starting by drawing the mist. I kind of overlapped them with the boxes in some areas. Now I just finished coloring the clouds with blue. To finish it off, I'm adding strips of grid washi tape. I'm also adding some of this blue washi tape to the habit tracker. It actually has little space-themed designs on it, but it's barely noticeable. And now for the final flip-through. I feel like this theme is a perfect way to end off the year because it's so peaceful and calming, which contradicts with the events that happened in 2020. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.